All right. Take it away, Michael.
All right. So then let's start. My name is Michael Moosbrugger from Schloss Gobelsburg Estate, and I would like to give you a very brief introduction into the vintage 2021 in Austria, and specifically at Gobelsburg Estate. I've prepared a few slides to give you a few impressions on what we have experienced in the past few months, and I have to ask Gabe to pass me over the host so that I can share my screen with you.
You should be good to go, Michael. Thank you.
All right, good. So here we are. I mean, we have been celebrating last year the 850th vintage of the monastic estate. As you all know, Gobelsburg is a very historical place, and we are looking back to quite some history. And in the context of all these celebrations, we did a series of festivities on the estate, and we opened and celebrated our new facility, the new cloister cellar. And also in this year we published a book on Gobelsburg. It's also translated into English, and so that should be available very soon, also in the US. And at the end of the year, we were very happy about the Wine Advocate ratings. Beside the top 100 spectator that we had and that we got our first 99 points for Heiligenstein, so we were very happy on that. And well, this is a picture actually from November. As you can see, I mean, it's just picturesque. We had just fantastic conditions last year, but I would like to go a little bit deeper now in what the conditions were in this last vintage. Now, vintage 2021 is obviously a little bit different to the conditions that people experienced in the more western parts of Europe. All about these difficulties that they had in France and Germany, but Austria is much more continental, with the result that weather conditions are somehow different to what our colleagues experience in the more Atlantic influenced areas. As you can see, Austria here and winemaking in Austria is here much more, to the eastern part of Austria, and Gobelsburg is located right here in the center of the so-called Danube area. It's a great area. It's a valley situation area. You have the main valley of the Danube, and you have the side rivers of the Danube, the valley of the Krems River, the valley of the Kamp River, the valley of the Treisen River. So basically it's a valley landscape, and with all the aspects that are following out of these conditions. Now, I made a few slides and graphs for you that shows a little bit, the conditions that we were experiencing. And as you can see, that winter was already very dry throughout April, and the result of a dry winter is always that you have a delay in the bud break. So bud break was basically at the end of April, beginning of May. In May, precipitation was not really severe. I mean, we had only like 50 liters during the whole month. Also, June was quite dry, with below 30 liters. And then you see that we had two very rainy months, July and August, which brought really a relief then for the vineyards. And then from the end of August until throughout November, there was basically no rain anymore. So We had a very dry harvest season. And also this is something that I will talk about later on. Now, looking to temperatures, you can see that the hottest month were June and July with 21, about 21 degrees in average, which is not particularly high. If we have a look to the vintages before, like the 3 vintages before, starting with 19, for example, then you can see here we have a completely different picture. It was also quite a dry winter, but then we had a peak in May, and then it was not too much throughout the summer, and then there was quite some rain in the beginning of September, with total precipitation of 416 liters in 2019. But you see the temperatures in 2019 were quite significantly higher. We have about 2 degrees in average temperature higher than what we have experienced in 2021. Comparing that also to 2020, you see that here you see also dry winter, and then it starts slowly in May and with a peak in July. But also 2020 was quite a coolish vintage, with the maximum of 20.5 degrees. But here we had a little bit more precipitation throughout the harvest season, August. So this is also a different picture. So I think if you're comparing now these 3 vintages, 2021 or 2019 to 2020 to 2021, you see completely different pictures in the development of precipitation and also in the average temperatures throughout the year. The total precipitation in 2021 was 450 liters, which is really about the average what we have normally here in Langenlois. So this is quite normal for our area. 2020 was much more than that, 710 liters. So you see that here we have much more rainfall throughout the year. And this is also what somehow people say this is something that you can feel also in the wines of vintage 2020. 2019 also dry with 416 liters. So this was basically, this is basically when it comes a little bit to numbers, and it explains a little bit, the personality of the vintage. Now, when we are looking to how the harvest started, and we started basically in the mid of September. First day of harvest was the 13th of September. And what we normally do is that we always start with the harvest for the grapes of the sparkling wines. And so the grapes for the Brut Reserve, the Blanc de Blanc, Brut Rosé and the vintage. We whole cluster press the grapes. And we're using only 40 to 45% of the juice for the base wines, for the sparkling. I have to say that we are really satisfied. Acidity levels are really high. I would say that since 1996, we didn't have these acidity levels in the sparkling wines as in vintage 2021. So this is, I have to say that I'm really looking forward to these sparklings. It seems to be that 2021 will be definitely, a vintage for the sparklings. Now, after the sparklings, we always do a little bit a pause and intermission. Then we started in the last week of September with the grapes for rosé. And I have to say that, when we're for our rosé, we are not using Saignée from the red wine grapes because I personally do not like Saignée rosé because the question is always, are you producing now definitely a wine, or are you producing grapes for a rosé wine, or are you producing grapes for a red wine? You know, and I think there is nothing in between. And so this is why we have always dedicated vineyards for the rosé, and we are targeting an alcohol level of something between 11.5 to maximum 12.5. We also like to have a little bit higher acidity levels. You know, the stylistic expression of rosé from the Danube area is a little bit different than, you know, the rosés from France. And so this is, I think that the expression and the expression of the Danube rosé is something that is really particular. And this is why we have dedicated vineyards that we use for the rosé production. When we're finished with the rosé, then we slowly go then to the regional expressions. Here you see a picture of harvest 1931, but this is how it looks today. You know, we are harvesting in small boxes, so that we in two different colors, so that we are able to already make a first selection in the vineyards with different qualities when we harvest. And then when the grapes arrive, then in the cellar, they are going through a sorting belt where we can do a second selection before the wines then go into the presses, and then furthermore with the grape processing. Now, in the beginning of October, we were starting with the regional expressions, Kammtal, Veltliner, Kammtal, Riesling. Very shortly after, we were also starting then with the red wines. It was a fantastic red wine vintage. As you can see here with the grapes, everything was healthy. There was not really much actually that we needed to select. Fantastic to the joy of the cellar master. And I think that we can expect some really astonishing red wines from this vintage. So really happy actually also on this side. Here you can see these are the soils where the red wines are grown, because in the Danube area you find a certain percentage of vineyards that are, you know, that are based on these riverbed sedimentation structures from the original Danube. Vineyards that look basically, you know, the same as in the Rhone Valley. And there we can grow some really interesting reserve red wines. And so we are quite happy actually with that. Then the harvest is continuing, and around the mid of October, we were starting then with the village and single vineyard wines. So Langenlois, Zöbing, and then slowly Steinsetz, and then all the other premier crus and grand crus like Ried Lam, like Ried Heiligenstein. Here you see the Tower of Heiligenstein, which is from the late 19th century. And here, this is a view from Heiligenstein to the castle, the church behind, and Ried Steinsetz behind the castle. And also here on the top, you can see the vineyards where we are growing our red wines. Yeah, here a picture to the new cellar. Yeah, but what can we expect actually, you know, from this vintage? What will be the typicity, the characteristics? And I think that, I mean, there are two aspects that are, you know, are forming the character of this vintage. On one side, we had really healthy fruit with throughout the whole harvest campaign, because there was basically no rainfall at all, so there was no infection of botrytis. This is another aspect about the vintage. There's no botrytis, so there is no sweet wine, except for the ice wine that we still have in the vineyards. And we are waiting for really cold temperatures. Normally we harvest at -9 degrees. But no sweet wines this year. because there was basically no botrytis. And what is really outstanding and really significantly different to all the vintages that I have seen so far is that we had extremely high maturity levels, even in the very cool sites. So even in sites where we normally are fighting really for maturity and for ripeness, even these vineyards showed some astonishingly high ripeness levels. And all this, it was always in combination with high acidity levels. I think that since 2014 or 2004, we have not seen that high acidity levels in combination with that maturity levels. So we are looking for the Rieslings with even more than 8 grams of acidity. And some batches even then between 8.5 and 9 grams, which is for our area and for the Danube area really high. Now, so far as we can taste the wines so far, I mean, the wines, they have a really clear fruit character, you know, only healthy fruit. The wines are really balanced on the palate. But even though that we have quite some high acidity levels, they're not acidic. You know, I mean, it's not that these wines are astringent or something like this. I think it's something that has something to do with the lack of water that the grapes had during the harvest season. So the grapes did not, you know, blow up. And this is the reason in my eyes, you know, that we still kept that high acidity levels until to the end of the harvest campaign. Well, this was a short overview on the vintage. I'm really looking forward to release the first bottlings from this vintage, which will be sometime in February, March with the regional expressions. And then we will see then the village wines will come then in May, June. The single vineyards, the non-classified single vineyards then in September. And with the Premier Crus, we will mature them for at least 18 months before we release them. It's really exciting. The vintage is a fantastic vintage for us. And yeah, looking to see you soon again. And from my side now, goodbye.
Thank you, Michael.